The officers thought they could get away with turning someone's pain into a joke. But the moment one of them lifted the black woman's skirt, everything shifted in an instant. They had no idea who they were messing with. And they definitely weren't ready for what came next. Tap subscribe if you stand for justice. And leave a comment if you've ever witnessed blatant injustice with your own eyes. In the still of a northern city night, the streets of Elridge had a way of murmuring softly, like the hush of wind threading through alleyways and between dim-lit windows. Not loud, not alarming, just steady, like time breathing quietly. Porch lamps blinked behind dusty blinds. The scent of old brick, diesel fumes, and late-season lilac lingered in the air. There was a hush that felt ancient. Like the town was listening. Into that silence walked Marissa Cole. Tall, deep brown skin. A quiet poise etched into every step. She moved slowly, not because she had to, but because she had learned to. She had just wrapped up her weekly self-defense class at the Linden Heights Community Center. It wasn't a job, more a mission. The women came not to fight, but to reclaim. Reclaim control, reclaim courage, reclaim their voices. Some were young and unsure. Others bore the weathered expressions of women who had endured too much. Marissa offered them what she could. A place to stand tall again. Once she had been a champion too. A martial arts prodigy with gold medals and highlight reels. Her name once echoed on live broadcasts, in packed arenas, on magazine covers. But all that faded the night her knee gave out mid-spin at a national finals match in Phoenix. She went from hero to too fragile in one bad landing. Endorsements disappeared. Calls stopped coming. They only love you when you win. She didn't chase that life anymore. Now peace was enough. She rented a modest flat above a second-hand record store on Jasper Street. Days filled with training, coffee, and long walks through streets she now knew like a second skin. That evening she wore a simple black dress and beat-up sneakers. Her training bag hung heavy across her shoulder. As always, she walked alone. The neighborhood had its dangers, but it was hers. She knew the crooked fences, the old lamp on Monroe that buzzed when it rained, even the tilted fire hydrant at the corner of Kingston. She had just passed the shuttered bodega with the faded open sign that hadn't glowed since 2016 when something in the air changed. Not fear, but tension, like the night held its breath. Still, she didn't turn around. She didn't need to. The soft crunch of tires behind her, slow and intentional, told her all she needed. A patrol car, no flashing lights, no sirens, just weight, just presence. She kept walking, steady and calm, but her body, trained to react, trained to read, was already alert. Scanning exits, measuring space, mapping every shadow. The vehicle rolled up closer. Voices murmured inside. Then a laugh. Low. Lazy. The kind of laugh that doesn't come from humor, but from power. Well, one of them said. A voice called out from the open window, its syrupy accent soaked in mockery. Well now, don't you look like a little midnight miracle? Another voice, lower and more bitter, added, Shouldn't you be tucked in by now, darling? Marissa didn't reply. Not because she was afraid, but because silence was sometimes louder than any words. The patrol car behind her didn't drive on. It slowed, almost crawling. She turned down Hemsworth Street, her usual route. They followed. Another voice barked out, this time more aggressive. What's a thick cocoa beauty like you doing walking these streets all by your lonesome? Still, nothing. A pause. Then the click of a door. The passenger side opened. One of the officers got out, swaggering like he was in a locker room, not a city street. He was young, baby-faced, buzz-cut, early 20s. He approached with a fake courtesy, like he was playing polite for an audience. Hold. Up, he said, his eyes crawling over her like she was a display in a pawn shop. You're that martial arts girl, right? The one from the sports show? Didn't think you'd be this real in person, he grinned. Marissa kept walking. But now his shadow lined up with hers, pacing her like a mirror. You used to smash faces for a living, huh? He said. Guess now you just blend in with the block like the rest of them. He laughed, as if he were the funniest man alive. The squad car behind them crept along, just slow enough to follow the scene. From inside, another officer hollered, Yo, Marcus, don't push it. She might actually knock you out. Laughter burst from the car. Marissa adjusted her shoulder strap, not out of fear, but calculation. Marcus, or whatever his real name was, stepped in closer. You know, he murmured, a girl dressed like that. Some might take it the wrong way. Then, without warning, he reached out and flicked the back of her dress. Not forcefully, not violently, just enough to humiliate, enough to show power. The laughter from the car cracked the silence like breaking ice. Someone honked the horn, twice. Marissa froze, not from panic, but precision, her breath steady, her body still. She had faced pressure before. She'd known victory, loss, pain. But this was something colder. She turned, slowly, with the grace of a tide changing course, her eyes locked on his. And Marcus, mid-smirk, stopped cold. Something in her stare unraveled him. When she spoke, her voice was steady, controlled. You think that was funny? He blinked, fumbled. Hey, chill. It was just a joke. No, she said, stepping in. You don't get to joke about me. Not tonight. His hand twitched upward, a reflex of retreat. We were just messing around. Her arm moved like lightning. She grabbed his wrist, twisted it behind his back, and yanked him down. He folded with a grunt. Helpless. The second officer jumped from the car. Marissa moved with instinct. A spin, an elbow, clean and precise, right beneath the ribs where the vest didn't reach. He stumbled back, wind knocked from his body. The third cop sat frozen in the driver's seat, his hand hovering near his holster. But not moving, watching, calculating. Marissa stood still, her chest rising and falling like tides on North Bay shore. She looked at them. Their uniforms, their confusion, their fear. She said nothing. She didn't have to. Then she turned and walked away. No one followed. Marissa's footsteps echoed softly along the empty road, her sneakers hitting the pavement in a slow, steady rhythm. Not hurried. Never hurried. The adrenaline had faded, but her breathing remained even, her pulse calm. Behind her, the patrol car still hadn't moved. She could feel their confusion now. Not threat, just unsettled silence. Questions left in the heavy night air with no answers. She turned onto Eldridge Lane, disappearing beneath the flickering glow of a half-dead streetlight. Her apartment was 3 blocks away. She walked those final minutes, as if nothing had happened, as if she hadn't just taken down 2 officers and stared down a third without raising her voice. The next morning, sunlight spilled between slatted blinds with no trace of the night before. The small apartment smelled of black coffee and warm cedar. She moved through her routine with practiced calm. A stretch, a shower, a moment of stillness by the window. Her phone buzzed. Nothing urgent. A local bulletin, a weather ping, a message saying her groceries were ready. No mention of sirens or uniforms or anything else. Just quiet. But quiet had a texture if you knew how to feel it. Across town, inside the district's 6th precinct, the air was changing, slowly at first, but undeniably. Officer Terrell Hammond, 26, relatively fresh to the department, came in with shadows under his eyes and a jaw clenched too tight. He skipped the morning banter, ignored the coffee line, kept his head down. Nearby, Officer Marcus King, the one who had touched Marissa's dress, sat at his desk, tapping his fingers in nervous bursts. He didn't laugh at the usual nonsense, didn't bring it up either. Not the incident, Not directly, but in a precinct, mood spreads quicker than facts. Sergeant Elaine Booker, a 20-year veteran who managed the station floor, felt it before anyone said a word. She'd seen this before. Not guilt, but bruised pride. The kind that came when men couldn't explain what shook them. When someone like Marcus stopped bragging and started blinking too often, she knew something had cracked. Around 10 a.m., she passed the break room and caught a hushed voice. She didn't even say anything. Then the scrape of a chair, a shuffle of feet. Silence, as soon as they noticed her. She moved on, but remembered. By lunchtime, whispers weren't enough to contain the tension. A dispatcher mentioned a missing entry on the night's log. A patrol, shift with no matching record. An IT technician flagged a gap in Marcus's body cam footage, a missing chunk with no procedural explanation. And then came the anonymous tip, a message dropped into the internal affairs inbox of junior investigator. Jordan Vega, 1 sentence. Watch Patrol Unit 12C. Something happened last night. Jordan almost brushed it off. Most anonymous messages were just internal noise, grudges or gossip. But something in the way those words were written, simple, clear, unembellished, stood out. He pulled up the logs. No reports filed from that. Unit between 10 p.m. and midnight. No tickets, no stops, no incident forms. Just GPS movement through quiet residential streets. One path looped past the old middle school on Larkspur Drive. Too late for a patrol. Too calm for a call. Jordan flagged it and wrote down the names assigned to the cruiser. Officer Marcus King, Officer Terrell Hammond, and Officer Jamal Reyes. Jordan jotted the names, leaned back in his chair, and stared at the patrol logs in silence. By nightfall, what had started as a whisper had become a wave. Sergeant Booker spotted Reyes in the lot behind the station, pacing between cruisers, phone pressed to his ear. His voice was low, tight with worry. I didn't touch her like that. No, I swear. I don't even know what she's going to do. Booker didn't step in. But she filed it away, like a detective collecting fragments. Then, like a spark in a dry field, the story caught fire. A senior officer from another unit said he'd heard something about a civilian takedown. Someone else mentioned a woman dropping. 2 officers and walking off. Another swore they recognized her. Marissa Cole. No one knew her personally, but someone remembered her face on a poster years back. An ad for a martial arts seminar. Proud, confident, impossible to forget. By the next morning, the station buzzed with too many questions and not enough answers. Captain Glenn Archer, head of Precinct 6, not known for tact or subtlety, called all 3 officers into his office. No smiles. No greetings. Just hard stares and closed doors. The 3 sat across from him. Reyes jittery, Whitman defensive, King unusually quiet. Tell me what happened on your last patrol shift, Archer said flatly. No one spoke right away. Reyes looked at his boots. King stared at the floor. Finally, Whitman muttered, "It was nothing." Archer didn't even flinch. "Nothing," he repeated. "Then I suppose you won't mind if Internal Affairs pulls your footage." That broke the silence. Reyes cracked first. I think we messed up," he said, voice dry and shaking. The other 2 stared at him, wide-eyed. But he didn't stop. He admitted enough. Not everything, but enough. They had followed her. They had made jokes. They had said things they shouldn't have. One of them touched her dress, and she didn't react the way they expected. She walked away. And something in the air hasn't felt right since. Archer didn't say a word. He picked up the phone and called upstairs. By 4 p.m., Internal Affairs had launched an inquiry. The patrol car was seized. Backup body cam files were pulled. Reyes was placed on leave. Whitman and King followed the next day. An internal memo circulated mentioning potential misconduct during civilian interaction. No names, no press. But the story had already slipped out. Marissa didn't hear any of this through official channels, but she could feel it. The next time she stepped into the cafe on Hudson Avenue, the barista who always joked with her stayed quiet. The older man who usually offered to carry her tea looked down when she politely declined. She wasn't a symbol. She wasn't a victim. She was a woman who refused to shrink. And the city didn't know how to handle that. Back at the station, the tension hung in the air like smoke after a fire. Voices were clipped. Conversations paused whenever certain names were said aloud. Even those uninvolved felt the weight. It wasn't just about what had happened. It was about what it exposed, how fast a story could spread, how 3 armed officers could be disarmed by a woman who never raised her voice. In a dim-lit room at Internal Affairs, Jamal Reyes finally told the whole story. He admitted to the remarks, the mocking tone, the flip of her dress, the expectation that she'd shrink back in fear, and then he described what actually happened. The stillness, the sharpness in her eyes, the exact controlled movements. How she took control without yelling, without threats, just by being there. She wasn't afraid of us, Reyes whispered at last. We were afraid of her. The Internal Affairs investigator stopped his pen mid-sentence. You think she should have been scared? Reyes paused, then slowly shook his head. No, I think we should have been. By the end of that week, the city had started to murmur. No sirens in the headlines, no bold fonts or splashy photos, just a small piece tucked into the bottom half of the Tribune's metro section. 3 officers placed on leave pending review of civilian encounter. No names, no quotes, just a brief mention, a questionable incident during standard patrol. But online, people began to connect the dots. This wasn't New York. This wasn't LA in a city like Elridge. Stories traveled faster than press releases, through corner stores, church pews, barbershops. By the second day, someone had dug up an old video of Marissa in a spotless white GI, breaking boards on a national sports show, sweat dripping, crowd roaring. Is this her? Wait, they tried that with her? She's still living here? The comments flooded in. Marissa saw none of it. As usual, she stayed offline. Calls came in. She ignored them. Former training partners, old coaches, even a journalist from Atlanta who left 3 messages in a row. Instead, she kept to her rhythm, morning walks, teaching at the community center, Thursday night class. She wasn't waiting for justice or vindication. She was waiting because she knew something most didn't. When power is challenged, it doesn't always retreat. Sometimes it watches and waits to strike. On Monday, a different cruiser appeared, parked across the street from her apartment building. New faces, new unit, but the same eyes. They weren't there to scare her. Not yet. They were calculating, trying to read her next move. Would she speak out? Would she press further? Marissa didn't flinch. She sat outside on the bench, coffee in hand, sunglasses, hiding her gaze. But she could feel them, watching, wondering, whispering. Inside the precinct, no one said her name anymore. Reyes had stopped showing up, claiming stress leave. King had lawyered up. Whitman refused to answer more questions. Everyone knew there was an investigation. No one wanted their name anywhere near it. Briefings grew shorter. Hallways got quieter. Even officers with no ties to that night began choosing their words carefully. Not out of fear, but because the illusion had cracked. Captain Archer, once loud and untouchable, kept his door shut more often now. The pressure had shifted, and the questions coming down from above weren't just about that one incident. They were about the culture, the pattern, and what else might have gone unseen. Some thought it might reach higher, not just the officers, but the whole command structure. So Archer scheduled sensitivity briefings, announced new reporting protocols, and circulated memos on cultural accountability. But everyone knew. This wasn't about reform, it was about appearances. Meanwhile, Marissa kept moving as if nothing had changed. No interviews, no lawsuits, no press conferences. And that silence unsettled them more than a courtroom ever could. She had spoken with stillness, with resolve, with the way she stood firm and walked away, leaving them exposed like boys playing with fire. They didn't understand. One afternoon, as she stepped out of the cafe on Hudson Avenue, a man in his 40s approached. Off-duty, still in partial uniform, he looked unsure, almost shy. "Miss Cole?" he asked. She turned, met his gaze. "I work at Precinct 6, he said. Some of us have been talking." She waited. He swallowed hard. "They're not afraid of being caught," he said quietly. "They're afraid because they don't know what you'll do next." Marissa looked at him, really looked, then gave a soft nod. "That makes two of us," she said. He nodded back, then left. The review, now under external oversight, gained speed. Footage from a dry cleaner's security cam corroborated parts of her story. The deleted body cam segment was recovered from a secondary server. The official report cited inappropriate conduct, unauthorized contact, and verbal escalation with racial undertones. But one line stood out in bold. The civilian did not escalate. The officers did. That sentence traveled. It landed in another memo. Then in a citywide assessment on use of force training and public accountability. A name once tied to trophies and tournaments was now surfacing in policy rooms and council meetings. Softly, inevitably. Without her even trying, Marissa still walked her route. She passed the mural of Maya Angelou, recently repaired after another act of vandalism. She paused, then kept going. People recognized her now. Some nodded, some looked away. A few approached, mostly women, in stores, on sidewalks. "Thank you," one said. "Not for fighting, for standing. My daughter's learning self-defense now, not to fight, but to know how to take up space." Marissa smiled, nodded, moved on. Weeks passed. One officer was formally suspended. Another resigned before facing a hearing. In a move that surprised his own lawyer, Jamal Reyes asked to speak again. "I don't want to be the guy who stays quiet," he said. "What we did, it wasn't just stupid. It was part of something bigger, and she stopped it." Internal Affairs marked his cooperation as exceptional, but the public had already reached its own conclusion. The silence had cracked, and silence, once broken, never quite heals the same. Marissa never made a statement. She ignored interview requests, left unread the offers to share her side, because the truth didn't need explaining. It had been seen, in how she stood, how she didn't flinch, and how a police department struggled beneath the weight of a moment it couldn't control or explain away. One crisp morning, as fall settled over the city and the breeze turned sharp, she walked her path again, past the shuttered school, past the fence still bent at the corner, past the spot where a stranger in uniform once reached for her dress. The sidewalk had been repaired, a new light installed, a camera mounted high. City initiative, they said, but the space still held something. Not fear, not shame, just memory. She paused, glanced around. No one watching, no movement. She shifted her bag, then walked on, her steps steady, her shadow long in the morning light. They had tried to reduce her to a moment, but she had become a mirror. And everyone, officers, leaders, strangers, had been forced to look, and this time they couldn't look away.